Hello, everybody. This is LOAC-TV, Library of American Comics Television, and I'm your host, Kurtis Findlay. Thanks for tuning in today. We've got some great conversation revolving around Steve Canyon. This one right here. But before we get to introducing the guest, I just want to make sure that you are aware of all of our social media, including Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. You can just search for LOA Comics on any of those platforms and find us, as well as here on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, we appreciate your likes and we appreciate your subscribes. This is standard live stream stuff, right? We've got a very special announcement about, not in this video, this is just a tease for something coming up later this week, is a very special announcement about a new book, Milton Caniff related, that the Library of American Comics is going to be producing this year, or early next year, I guess. So stay tuned for that announcement. Okay, we have a special guest today. I want to introduce Michael O'Connell. Thank you for joining us on the show, Michael.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me on, Kurtis.
Now, you've contributed to some of the stuff here that we've done in the Library of American Comics, including this volume that we're talking about today. But I want to ask you about your association with Milton Caniff in general. When did you first discover Milton Caniff?
My parents, they grew up in the Depression. My father was in World War II. And when I was growing up, I remember them talking about the Dragon Lady. So, and they, when I asked them what that was, they said, it was this comic strip that they, read, Terry and the Pirates. And for the longest time, that was really kind of the only association I had. And, I became a comic book collector later on, and became aware of Milton Caniff, but it really wasn't until the early 2000s, actually, when I had been reading some books about the creators of the early days of comics back in the 30s and 40s, and they talked about the artists that had influenced them. And in actuality, a lot of the first generations of comic book artists wanted to be comic strip artists because that, it was like a superstar. Yeah. In popular culture at that time. And besides Caniff, we're talking Hal Foster and Alex Raymond, all of them, and also Roy Crane, I should throw him in as well. Yeah. Did quite a lot to establish the way dramatic and adventure storytelling was done in the comic strip sections. And there are lots of different camps, and I ended up finding myself in the Caniff camp because I'd found some reprints in a used bookstore from the 1970s. They weren't great reprints, but they were, the first few years of Steve Canyon, and I really, something clicked with me with them. They had a real sort of film noir feel to them, and I just kind of liked the way his storytelling and everything. And so I was sort of on the hunt for more reprints, and I found that there'd been reprints in the the Comics Review, and then also there was a magazine that Kitchen Sink had put out in the 80s. So I got some of that stuff, but it's the strip, as I found out, was 44 years long, and I was just kind of like, well, I'm just going to read this little piece of it. But I was at the Chicago Wizard World in 2012, and I ran into two dealers who had gotten this collection from the family of a former Coast Guard admiral. And not only did it have artwork, but it also had every strip of the entire run of the from 1947 to 1988. Wow. It's 41 years, not 41. And I was intrigued, and coincidentally, they both actually, I live outside the Washington D.C. area, and the dealer who had the actual collection of the strips was 10 minutes from my house. So it was just sheer dumb luck that I kind of stumbled on it. So when I got back into town and he had gotten back in town, we met up. And I bought the strips, and I was like, over the moon. I was like, okay, so now I can, from the very first strip to the very last strip, I can just completely read it sequentially. I realized as a comic book collector that this was kind of a unique opportunity. But the thing was that the more I dug into the boxes, it wasn't just strips. There were just all these other materials around around Milton Caniff and the Steve Canyon strip, and there were newspaper articles actually about the Coast Guard officer. His name was Richard Ballman, and in 1969 he was interviewed by a paper down in the Newport News area that about he had just come home from Vietnam, and but the story was about his collection and about how every he would clip the stories. He would actually set the section aside every day, and every Saturday he would clip them and he would put them into scrapbooks, and he did that from very early on. And the story, wow, what are the chances somebody's going to call me in the middle of this? So in the story, it was really kind of sweet because Richard Ballman was actually in the Merchant Marine at the very end of World War II. He was in one of the cargo ships that had brought supplies over after D-Day. And after the war, he came back to that can just ring then. He came back to the United States, and he got engaged with this the woman who would become his wife, Dorothy. And they were, young engaged couple, and he just started reading Steve Cannon in 1947, and he was going to go out on a ship for months and months and months. His ship was going to go to China, and so he's saying goodbye to his fiance, and he says to her, I'm really going to miss you, but I'm also going to really miss finding out what happens to Steve Cannon. And so
priorities, right?
priorities. But she took that in the correct spirit. While he was gone, she clipped all the Steve Cannon strips and put them in scrapbooks.
Yeah.
So when he came back, she gave them to him.
Wonderful.
And so for me, reading that, I was just kind of just torn up of it. I mean, it was just like, man, this is a part of their life.
Yeah.
And the fact that every day he clipped every strip, and they both lived a very long life together, and every day was sort of a reaffirmation of that love. And that really kind of spoke to me.
Yeah.
In my day job, I'm a journalist, and so I was like, man, this is a great story. I got to do something. I got to do something with it. But one of the first things I did was, I talked to the two comics dealers, and there was artwork with it as well. That Ballman was in communication, with Caniff since like the mid '50s, and Caniff would, they would, Dottie would write him Caniff and say, could you please send us something that we could give Richard for his birthday. And explaining that he was at that time he was still in the Merchant Marines. Later he joined the Coast Guard, and so Caniff just developed this relationship with them. And so every few years they would write him, and he would send along stuff. Let me see what I have here to show you real quick. So one of the first things they sent him was this large. This is a print that's hand colored, and it's dedicated to Richard. Yeah, sorry. It's dedicated to Richard and signed by Caniff. He did that a lot. He had these prints made up, and then someone would either. It's unclear as to whether he was the actual one who was doing the coloring of it, but he would personalize them and send them out. But he also, in the first batch, he sent along like this, which is, that's a daily strip. And he, along the top, he personalized it to Ballman and giving him best wishes on his birthday. This is 1952. And so through the years, the Ballmans would communicate with Caniff and updates Richard's career in the military. And when Richard was deployed to Vietnam, for 13 months. Dottie wrote Caniff and said he's he's serving Vietnam. It'd be great if you could do something where that Steve Cannon is an Air Force officer, and this is he's in the Coast Guard, but maybe you could do something where he salutes. So in 1967, he sent this birthday drawing, this original drawing, to Dottie, who sent it then to Richard, who was stationed in Vietnam. And there's even at the back of it a little note from Milton. There's a letter also somewhere with this. So, the more I began to research this, I discovered that Caniff, obviously for the purposes of, the war years of Terry and, Steve Cannon, once it became a military strip or associated military strip, he had developed all of these relationships with people in the military.
Yeah.
And, I had the opportunity to go to the Billy Ireland Library and Museum and do some research. I found some letters from the Baumans. And, that was one of the things he did. Caniff was sort of a master of PR. He knew how to promote his strip. And that's something a lot of people, when they think about Caniff, they don't always realize, he was a big deal. And for him to continue and to grow his strip, he needed to be out there meeting people and doing, making communications with people. He would go and he'd do chalk talks, and he'd provide this artwork for people who requested it on top of all the other work that he was doing. So, this is part of his, MO, that he had this relationship with different military people through the years. And so eventually, I ended up reading the whole strip, and it took me a long time to get a lot of material together, but a couple of years ago, I wrote two stories about the collection for the Comics Journal, which I'll put the links here into this if people want to read more about it. And I spoke with the Baumans family about it and interviewed them for the story, and they were, this was kind of a big deal for their father. This was the thing that he did that he loved, and it sort of occupied him. And he would as the strip got older, it became harder and harder for him to track down newspapers that were running it, because a lot of times the strip was dropped. Yeah. And so he, in the boxes, there are all this evidence of him writing to newspapers all over the country, trying to get, and this is before there were comic book shops, really. And there was there wasn't necessarily a awareness of sort of a comic book collecting culture. So he's out there as a military man doing this thing, tracking down these strips. They'd be on vacation and they would go to they'd be at a park and they'd be camping or something, but then they have to go out to a store to see if they could find a newspaper with the strip in it. So, these are the things he did for the love of his strip. So that's kind of my relationship with it. I actually ended up reading Steve Cannon before I ended up reading, Terry and the Pirates, which is, I guess, pretty backwards for most enthusiasts. But, it's been a wonderful experience, researching this story and writing it. And, in the process, obviously, I've got other artwork that I've picked up that aren't associated with the collection. But, I got to a point, my thought from the very beginning was to keep the collection together, because there was so much material that spoke a lot to the collecting mentality from the 50s, 60s, and 70s of what people were doing. So there's all this extraneous material. And so I very soon I'm going to be donating all of the Bauman stuff along with some material that I have to the Lilly Library at Indiana University, which is why I reached out. Which is why I reached out to you, because I thought, okay, this is an opportunity just to make people aware of this, that, this is an interesting story, but it's also, speaking to people who may have, unique things in their collection, that there are places like Billy Island, Michigan State University, and the Lilly Library at Indiana University in Bloomington that accept these materials, so that people can research them and enjoy them going forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, just don't just toss it out or dump it at your local Savers or something.
Well, yeah, and also part of it is, I've also divested myself of my own, a lot of my own collection, just because, I'm getting older. I don't want it to be necessarily be a burden to people.
Yeah.
The stuff that I can sell, I sell. The stuff that I think is worth giving to somebody or has maybe some sort of collecting or research value, I'll give it to an institution or something.
Right.
But responsible comic ownership. That's
That's
what
right.
it's all about.
I think most of the people watching this can relate to that for sure.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you, what was your reaction to opening up this box and realizing not only did it have all of the strips, but all of this extra material? You must have been just like out of your mind.
It kind of blew my mind, really. And the Comics Journal story, one of them has a picture. I loaded up on the back of my truck. This wasn't a box. This was like 4 boxes plus like other boxes that because the collection was sort of divided between these 2 dealers, and the other dealer, who was up in Maryland, he eventually sold me some of the artwork and sold me some other materials. I mean, there's a whole set of Caniffites journal, pardon me, fanzine, which was produced in the 80s and 90s, and it's almost a complete run. I think there's like 1 issue that's missing, but it's just this is a guy who was not a traditional comic book fan, but as we see comic book fans now, which tend to be a little more organized, they know where the resources are. This is a guy who's out in the wilderness, loves something, his weekly newspapers, daily newspapers stop running the strip. He doesn't give up on it. He goes and hunts down. He reaches out to friends across the country to send him copies of newspapers. This is somebody who was a diligent collector, but it was also the relationship it had with the family. So that to me was one of the most powerful things. I don't have it with me. One of the pieces of artwork was the first time that Caniff had drawn Steve Kanan in his full dress uniform. So in of itself, that's kind of a cool piece.
Yeah.
But when Bauman retired, actually, let me show you 2 things. He stepped down from an assignment in the 1970s in the Hampton Roads area, and the crew of his ship, knowing that he was a big Caniff fan, sent him this. This is from like 1973.
That's wonderful.
And then the last thing that he got was when he actually retired from the Admiralty. He retired from the Coast Guard. The people he worked with contacted Caniff, and gave Caniff a headshot of Richard Bauman, and here he is.
Oh yeah, there it is.
So it kind of closes the circle that from the beginning he was, the Caniff was sending him Steve Canyon artwork, and at the end he does a portrait of this man who would dedicate his life to the strip, to the love of his life, and to love his life is his wife. I want to make sure that's clear. but then also, to the military. So it all brings it together. So that's my story around it. And so I've become something of a Steve Canyon expert, sort of by association with this collection.
Yeah. Well, there are, I think, very few people in the world that can say they've read Steve Canyon from beginning to end.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, because even the big fans, who may have been following it from right after World War II, the chances are their local paper had dropped it. We're going to be talking a little bit about this, the volume that you've got here from 1967 and 1968, and really that's kind of where things begin to change for Caniff regarding the strip. And papers started dropping him, and then once you get into the 1970s, gag strips are becoming more popular, and the size of the drawings get really small.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really sad because with Caniff, and reading R.C. Harvey's biography of him, and this was really kind of concerning, because this is a guy who put so much effort into. You look at Terry and the Pirates, or the first few years of Steve Canyon. There's so much detail, there's so much research that went into the drawing and in the storytelling. And by the time you get into the 70s and then into the 80s, it's, you know, there's sort of this weird melange of gag strip and adventure strip. And it's, you know, it's something for a true fan. And so, you know, I don't want to, because you're going to have books to sell in the future, but I think somebody who's read this far in Steve Canyon is going to want to see where it comes out. There's still a lot of good stories in the 70s and in the 80s. There's some gaps where there may not be, some stories may not be quite as good, but it's really kind of a testament to who the artist was.
Yep.
You know, and his stature in the cartooning community, because he was also a leader in the you know, the cartoonist group and one of the founding members. And you know, I'm privileged so many times because of this collection, just having the opportunity as a fan just to read it, but also to meet a lot of different people, to get a chance to talk to you. You know, none of this stuff would happen if I hadn't just sort of ran into these guys at a convention in Chicago.
No kidding. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, it is. It's and actually I've got over here, I just want to show you this. This is one of the scrapbooks that a lot of, you know, obviously they're going to have different covers, but most of the scrapbooks are just sort of paper. And, you know, this is kind of how much I found them. Very readable. One of the nice things about them, especially in the early years, you get these really large Sunday pages, which unfortunately you can't always, you know, reproduce at that size. And so that's another little benefit that I've had with this collection. But this one here, actually, this is sort of typical of what it looks like. You know, the dailies are on one side and the Sunday. Now, this is a Sunday from 1967. And this is sort of the same volume that we're going to be talking about. There's Poteet. But yeah, there were 80 scrapbooks. And like I said, it's a lot of scrapbooks. It's not just one box.
That's incredible. It's
just taking so much room. And you know, the funny there's so many odd, funny things about this. I mean, because on the one hand, you know, it's amazing this achievement he did. But you know, when he did discover that there was a fan community in the 70s and 80s, and he reached out to other fans, you know, they were telling me, no, you can't put them in scrapbooks. You gotta cut them out. You gotta stack them up and put them in envelopes. They gotta be this way. And he was kind of like, or save the whole page. And he's like, I don't have room. You know, I've got kids. I'm in the military. I'm constantly moving. I can't do this. This is the way I'm doing it. One of the things his daughter said was that whenever they moved, until the collection got too large, the Steve Canyon collection always went with the family in the car.
Yes.
But when they got too big, then he had to figure out with different ways to deal with it. So
he drives the U-Haul truck himself or something.
Yeah, I guess, or I can't imagine him shipping it or whatnot. You know, but you know, and there, like I said, there are letters from Caniff, the Caniff talking to them and just thanking for being so enthusiastic about the strip, and talking about how he likes to hear updates from people. So
now, is every single strip in those scrapbooks? Every single one?
Every single one.
He just didn't miss a day. That's just incredible.
Well, when he had come back from China and he got these scrapbooks, he went to the newspapers and dug up the first few months.
Okay.
So so when I went to the comic shop, you know, it was just this table with all these boxes, and I'm kind of like, you know, there's no way that this is the whole strip.
Yeah.
And so I found one of the hardbounds. He redid the first couple of years in sort of a larger hardbound, or not hardbound, but hardcover scrapbook. Yeah. And I opened it up and I saw the first week and the first Sunday, you know, the famous strips. And I say, okay, he has the beginning. He has the beginning of it. Then there are all these other strips. And so I dig through a couple of boxes, and then in one of the other large scrapbooks, I find the final strip from June of 1988, which was the dedication to him by all the other cartoonists who'd signed a picture that I think it was Maudlin had drawn for him as a salute.
Wow.
So yeah, and I read it sort of in fits and in spurts. I can tell you that the 70s, the 80s went kind of really quick, but it was fascinating, and I'm sure that people who are having the chance to read the books that you're publishing and have been following them every time they come out are sort of getting the same experience. It's amazing. It's amazing to see how his work evolved. And the story. I mean, the storytelling is still strong. I think certainly through the 60s and into the first few years of the 70s, it's really strong. The characters. He's got some characters in there a little questionable. That's just kind of his approach and the way he sort of viewed certain things. The strips that we're going to be talking about today, the book, when you get into 67 and 68 and you're dealing with Vietnam and you're dealing with hippies, he certainly wasn't as bad as, say, Al Cap, but he had because of who he was and his age, and he's older than the people who fought in World War II, but because of his age, I think he had a certain perspective or attitude about young people and Vietnam that I do not think was really that much different than their parents. He was, I don't understand why you're doing this. This is the wrong thing to do. It's an un-American. And once he started, that sort of attitude came into the strip. Certainly when he began depicting Steve showing up in Vietnam, the strips in Canada, the newspapers in Canada canceled him, which surprised him. But then, other papers around the country started canceling him and canceling the strip. And he was using his pole. He was like writing to, R.C. Harvey writes about this, where he was writing to like base commanders in Texas. Hey, your local paper has canceled Steve Canyon. Could you call them or send them a letter and tell them that they're reading? And some of it worked. Some people did that because it's Milton Caniff. But other people, it changed, and people's tastes changed as well. I mean, this is also the 60s. This is the time of Snoopy and Peanuts.
Right.
That kind of strip is on the rise, and so a lot of was changing in this the late 60s and in the 70s. That the fact that he was able to carry it on until 1988 is a real kind of testament to his work ethic, but also to, I think, the respect with which he was held in the publishing and in the cartooning community.
Well, I think that fans of classic comic strips definitely will tolerate the dips in quality. I mean, we published all of Dick Tracy from start to finish, or Chester Gould's, and there's certainly parts of that are like, oh man, what was he thinking?
Right. Right, and it's strange. There's a story in the late let's say in like the mid 80s where that he writes about a gay chief, and it is not a very evolved portrayal of a gay person. Right. And so I was kind of like, well, okay, we got to put this in the context of when this came out. It's certainly, it's like, this is your grandfather making a joke that you're like, no, this is not, you really can't do that because it's not the right thing to do. But, again, this was the time, this was the man, this is, the age he was and kind of the promote, what he was promoting. But let's not talk about the negative things. Let's talk about the good things that people can find in these strips. When we picked out this volume because I had reached out in 2013 to Bruce and Dean about the stuff that I had, and I sent them some scans of some of the artwork, and they were like, "Yeah, this is great." So they, I told them what artwork I had, and I sent it to them, and they did the scans for the book, and I said, "Do you want me to write something?" And it's like, "No. We'll work it in here when we get to it." And then here we are, 7 or 8 years later, and it suddenly sort of shows up in the book. I'll let you open it and do stuff, which is great. And the timing worked out well as well, because I had a chance to write about it for the Comics Journal, and they were able to sort of mention that story and glean a lot of the information about the collection. But it's what's nice is that, you know, even while there was negativity growing toward you know, the Vietnam War at this time, you know, Caniff remained loyal to the people who were in the military. He continued throughout the war to, you know, respond to requests for artwork, appearances, things like that. I have a photo. There's a photo in one of the scrapbooks of Caniff, like from a newspaper in Hampton Roads at a like a Navy hospital, where he's, you know, he's walking through the Navy hospital drawing portraits for you know, for the servicemen who were recovering there. So, you know, and he knew kind of the value of establishing these relationships and you know, speaking to, yeah, that's a wonderful picture.
This is really wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Yeah, he didn't turn his back on them at all at any of this, because he understood that his readers not necessarily were the military people. His readers were the family members who were at home, who were proud and who were, you know, concerned about their children, who were fighting a war you know, on the other side of the world, which is something that, you know, that Caniff was aware of in World War II and in Korea. You know, it was Korea that put Steve back in uniform. Oh, that's another one. I can tell you this story real quick.
Sure.
This came up on an auction a few years ago, and I was fortunate enough to be able to purchase it. And you know, I reached out to the guy who was selling it to me to get sort of the backstory of it, and I was able to get in contact with the man who'd sold it. And when I went to the Billy Ireland Museum, I did a little more research, found the original letter to Caniff about this, and what it is, it's a short timer's calendar. Now, typically, what would happen, short timer computer is what Caniff calls it, is that they for the final like 90 days or 60 days that somebody's going to be in Vietnam, they'll get a sexy picture and they'll divide it up into like 60 pieces. And each day that they're there, the soldier colors the final piece and covers the piece for that day. And so that by the end of it, you know, it'll be fully colored. So this is him, you know, a Marine officer reaches out to them. Hey, I know you support the military. Would you do this for us? And, you know, he whipped this out and he, you know, sent it off to them, and they were able to use it in that way.
That's amazing.
So, yeah. Yeah. Amazing stories. Yeah. Here he is. I mean, he did, like, these are, I don't know the full story of this. I know this is Pittsburgh. Yeah. I don't know if it's associated with the Boy Scouts or.
Yeah. Boy Scouts in Ohio. Oh no, that was with.
Yeah, no, that's Boy Scouts. Yeah,
this is in Pittsburgh. You know, Ohio is where Caniff is from.
Yeah. It was there was some big event, and he did this all the time. He would do murals and he would do special artwork. I have like some drawings of like a Boy Scout badge that he had done, and on their request of the Boy Scouts, people that he had associations with, you know, clubs, the military, the Boy Scouts, things that played big, you know, roles in his life. He was very loyal to people. And, you know, if somebody asked him for something, he would give it. And, you know, but at the same time, he had to get a strip out every day. And he was always very mindful of that. And, you know, he did have help. The strips that we're reading, you know, in 67 and 68, you know, Richard Rockwell was doing the backgrounds. Here's the stuff from the Bauman collection. That's him. And
that's him.
Yeah. And that picture there is him at his home in Portsmouth. This is after he came back from Vietnam. The jacket he's wearing is his foul weather jacket, And when Dottie requested the artwork, she asked if he could do Steve wearing the foul weather jacket, and
Cool.
so he did. So
Yeah.
yeah,
What you don't get from this is how big this picture is. Like, I'm
yeah,
glad that you're here to show us because it's reprinted this big in the
yeah.
book, but the picture is actually huge.
To go back to the other page on the left, and see that's Bauman and his wife Dottie and one of their kids
With the
in this
scrapbooks.
in this very post photo. But this is what they did. This is the very low tech way with which this guy, kept the strips. And when he found Canifite's fanzine in the 70s and 80s, he was, he had letters that were published in those, and he talked a little bit about the collection. And once Caniff had died, and and Bauman was talking about, well, now that I have all these collection, all these strips together, I'm looking forward to in retirement just reading from the beginning to end. And apparently he according to his daughter, he would frequently read stuff. She told the story of he went back to read like a few years, and he panicked because he got to a page and there was a strip missing.
Yeah.
And he was like, and this is from a few years before, where's the strip at? So he went through, like I said, these boxes are jam full of stuff. The boxes are jam full of extra strips. So he eventually was able to find the strip. He was able to paste it back in. He made a note in the notebook that it had been missing. But he was also always on the constant lookout. There are letters from other collectors who have strips of Steve Caniff that they've clipped. They're sending him. There are clippings from the Comics Buyer's Guide. So apparently, at some point, he was able to pick that up.
Right.
Yeah. So here we go, the cast of characters.
So one of the things that you had mentioned is that this strip was for the families back home, and Steve Kenyon has such an amazing cast of supporting characters because of that, I think, as well, because these are the people that we relate to, a lot of the people back home and such, as well as the people overseas. Like, you got to have both, I think.
Yeah, and I'm sure there will be people who will disagree with this statement, but actually, having read the entire strip, the least interesting person in the strip is Steve Kenyon.
Yes.
because he was designed to be, designed to be sort of a Gary Cooper, quiet guy. He's a good guy. He's got a good heart. He's loyal. He's faithful. He does the job that needs to be done.
Yep.
But he doesn't exhibit any particular negative behavior. And actually, it's only the strips, the ones that I really like are the ones where, he's sort of on edge because he's actually the woman he loves, like Summer Olsen. Those are the strips where you begin to see that there's something more to him. But those are sort of, far between. A lot of here he is, the military man showing up. This looks like this is one of the Alaska strips, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, where he shows up, or is this Dama?
Or no, this is still China, right?
Yeah, that's Princess Snowflower. Is it Princess Snowflower? I don't know. It's been a while since I read the strips, but I've been picking up the volumes too. I really enjoy them. I like reading the intros. They're very well researched. I had a chance to interview Bruce a few months back about what's going on at LOAC, right. And yeah,
I just can't believe how much detail he packs into one of these strips.
Yeah, go on.
He's just a master of composition because everything is in the right spot. He knows exactly where to place the action, where to place his word balloons, and all of the shadows. Like this strip right here with this tiny little train crossing this little bridge here, it's just incredible.
His inking is astounding. And I said that Dick Rockwell had helped him with this. I'm not sure how many people, if the people listening to this understand. Caniff would do roughs
Yeah.
Or actually, what actually would happen, he would write the script out first. He'd send it to the letterer. At this point, it would have been Frank Engley. Later on, it would be Shel Dorf, the guy one of the people who founded Comic-Con.
Right.
Anyway, so he would do the script. He'd send it to the letterer. The balloons would come back. Then Caniff would do the roughs, and he'd hand it to Dick Rockwell. Rockwell would do the backgrounds and other figures in pencil. And then Caniff came in and just did everything with ink. And I forget who I was talking to, but one of the things they said was, I talked to somebody who'd seen Caniff drawing or video of him like doing a strip, and it was as if he were drawing with ink, with an ink brush. I think when he realized that it's the daily grind of this was too much. If he certainly as he got older, he saw the need to have an assistant, and I think he understood that his inking was the thing that sort of set him apart. So
yes.
I think that's why I think he was willing to let somebody else have such a big part in it. And people who might say, oh, Rockwell did the whole strip, in the few months between when Caniff died and the final strip ran, Rockwell, with the help of Shel Dorf, they had to put the final story over a period of weeks. And Rockwell had a difficult time with the faces. Steve Cannon did not look like Steve Cannon at the beginning, but eventually, when he got to sort of the last few strips, he had been able to get the face the way that it looked like the Steve Cannon character was. There's Poteet, which is probably one of the best characters in the entire run, because it kind of gives you this whole nother level of storytelling, the things that she's doing as a reporter, and able to sort of get involved in stories that Steve Cannon is not going to get involved with. She goes and gets involved with people who are drug dealers, or doing stories about all the stuff that she was doing as a reporter, and so it was just for a period of months she'd be the centerpiece of the story, and then it kind of handed off. Bitsy Beekman is another one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, so this is one of the main stories in this volume, is her getting in really big trouble with some drug dealers.
Yeah. God, look at that inking in the cabinet. Yeah,
it's just so tight, and there's so much ink, but the highlights are all in the right spot, so you can still see exactly what's going on. Just everything around the car.
I'm gonna make sure I put a few curves in the dirt, because that's going to show where tire tracks were.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
thinking at that level, and again, he's going over pencils, somebody else's pencils at this point.
The light from underneath here, just fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, he's there's a lesson in a lot of these, and you don't always see this. Certainly, you don't see this level of dark in daily strips now. I mean,
well, yeah, I can just imagine, like, we're looking at a book that's
somebody will send it back to him. It's too dark.
Well, and this is reprinted and it's nice and clear, but like the ink would bleed so much into the newsprint that a lot of this would get so muddy, I would think.
Yeah.
Especially when it's shrunk down so small.
But actually, the fortunate thing, and I don't think you necessarily get it from the stuff in the 60s strips, but the thing that astounded me when I was reading the clipped strips, and certainly looking at them in a larger format, is the coloring. I never ever really appreciated what he was doing at the coloring. As I said, I came to Terry and the Pirates late, but once you see the way he was coloring strips, the different way he was doing it, I mean, you like I said, you don't see it so much at this point. But I've got one of my favorite strips from the 50s. It's like there's like almost a profile of Steve. Well, you see most of his face, and it's red. It's just all red.
Right.
And then somebody else, a couple of panels down, it's all green. But it all works. and it's just, somebody seeing the colors in that way, and using them that way as part of your storytelling. It just sort of boggles your mind. Here's an interesting. I think it's Dogi. Is an
Dogi,
interesting character. He's almost like a Charles Bronson or a Clint Eastwood type of character brought into the strip. Again, this goes back to what I was saying about Steve Kanan's being so sort of vanilla. That you get these types of characters coming in who are sort of appealing to that. Oh, we need some guy to mess people up, to do the dirty work.
because Steve's not going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, Steve is, but in the end, Doogie always ends up the loser in it somehow, and because of his the way he deals with things. This is how he deals with things. Ooh, nice.
Nice, yeah. Just like
the jungle stuff. I love the jungle stuff.
It's just so every single panel, just quite amazing.
Yeah. Oh, this is the girl with the tiger, I think. Does she have a tiger? Yeah, I think it's a tiger.
He makes some good use of some of the Ben-Day dots as well to indicate the foreground or background.
Yeah.
Doesn't use that often because he lets his inking do that. So it's a very... Wait, here's the tiger. Right.
Yeah. Oh, is the tiger hurt or is he sleeping? Oh, it's asleep.
Fast asleep. That's a good-looking tiger there.
It is a good-looking tiger.
Must have had some good reference for that. Oh yeah, and there's a big story in this volume where Steve gets amnesia. Whoops, I just lost my.
That's phone. Okay.
Let me take myself off a solo here.
Okay.
Well, I'll bring my phone back so that we can get some more pictures here. It sometimes does that.
There's a big long one. I don't think it's the same one. I think it's actually in the 70s where he loses his memory for and he's like a Russian agent or something. I want to say it's like 71 or something. It's just bizarre, but it's incredibly, Caniff would sometimes do really strange stories, but occasionally he'd get on one that was it was weird, but it was like, yeah, this is kind of cool. Maybe that was his. He was an excellent storyteller. I mean, and that's, again, there's so many things to sort of mourn when the strip begins to shrink, because and the fact that he made a conscious effort to cut back the length of the stories. And that was when I went back to read Terry and the Pirates. That was one of the things that I appreciated, because those stories were sometimes very loose, and you would have strips that were in the middle of the week that had nothing to do with the rest of the story, but were all about character development, or they were just a really funny moment or something. Right. And they added so much, genuineness to the characters. I think that's why people are such a fan of his early work. This is stuff. Look, it's Kirk Douglas. Yeah,
wonderful.
This has to do with this is a story about the Olympics. That Kirk Douglas was somehow involved in the Olympic Committee, and I know that some people are criticized. I've heard people criticize Caniff for inserting obvious people that he knows in the strip, that it somehow sort of breaks the barrier. But
I love that he's always putting these insignias in the background of his stuff.
Oh yeah, and he did that all. Yeah, did that all the time.
I think. Where are the? Oh, here. Look at this. This one is just great.
I said, the color. Look at the color. Look at the way that is that gray or is that blue at the bottom?
It's blue. It's a dark. Yeah, it's a dark bluey purple. But
look how much that sets that apart.
The lighting on here,
giving this wonderful 3D effect, and the explosion is what's giving you the lighting. I mean, that's the stuff that just blew my mind. Once I saw his color work, I knew that the ink was something important, but once I saw the color work, it was just like, oh, this is really astounding.
Very.
Yeah. The and here we are in Vietnam. This book contains, actually, I think there might be 2 Vietnam-based stories. The one with Dogie, and then that goes into another one, which is a little more infamous, about the sort of sourpuss lawmaker who comes over with his daughter, who's, I don't know if she's mixed up in drugs. I think she's sort of a Jane Fonda type character, and so they give Steve the assignment to drive the. Look, there's his boss, Fillery, who was Phil Corkin or Flip Corkin from the same. They're based on the same character, or the same friend of his. Those character from Terry and the Pirates. But yeah,
Okay.
it's Steve's assignment is to help the senator. Well, maybe not. Maybe this is the where he goes undercover and then loses his memory.
This is totally that story. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. This is a bizarre story.
Yeah.
It's when I say bizarre, it's not bad. It's just so unlike almost every other thing. There's a thing where he loses his memory in the early 1950s. It's somewhat similar to, but I think it's Ho Chi Minh in the middle of that last thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Here's some more good lighting.
Yeah. Doing lighting with the blacks is one thing, but once you introduce the element of color, then it becomes this whole nother amazing stuff. That's not Poteet. That's I think that's an agent or somebody who's helping. Yeah. Oh no, he's got a gun on him. Or this is somebody else. Yeah.
But yeah, this is Steve. He's undercover, and
he loses his memory at some point, and so he looks like this, and he just sort of wanders around for a week or two like this. But there is, all these great schemes he's involved.
Here, look at this.
Oh, there we go. Oh, they're trying to get his memory back. You remember all this stuff?
And then all of this. This is all stuff from the previous years.
Yeah. This is not at all clip artwork that the artist has put together to save himself some time.
But it still works effectively, especially if you have been a long-time Steve Canyon reader and you're like, oh, I remember this scene. I remember that scene.
Oh yeah, I'm poking fun, but I'm not definitely criticizing it. I think it's he knows how to use stuff like this.
Yeah.
Some people sort of they'll lean on something for whatever work saving, whatever. But he still was thinking about the story, and it's now, go on.
I want to know what this strip looked like in your scrapbooks, because it was the 2-tier version, right?
Yeah, well,
I have no idea how they would lay that kind of thing out.
Is that like a half page or a?
This looks like it's half. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the scrapbook I have now at my fingertips is not.
It was a third, right?
Yeah, right now I have thirds. This is the stuff,
1968, July 1968.
Yeah, this one goes up to, I think, like the very beginning of 68.
Okay. Yeah, because he did this kind of thing a lot, where he'd take up he wouldn't do it in a traditional layout. I always wonder how other papers would deal with it. If they would get it and they were like, oh man, he did it again.
Yeah, one of the things that the Baughmans had gotten, Caniff had sent him a Sunday page from original from 1954, and it's it was the piece of artwork when I got it was actually somewhat dirty. There was a lot of dust and dirt on it, and I got it cleaned and they remounted it. But there were, it's the old thing that he drew in a half-page layout, and then somebody at the engraving shop would slice out each panel and rearrange it, and shoot it for the other types of layouts, which in the end sort of means you lose some of the artwork in the different shapes. God,
this was a weird story. This was so strange.
That was, no, he was just in Vietnam like 2 months ago, with a tiger, and now here he is running around bald with a medallion on his, getting married or something.
He's
I don't
called the
know.
Golden One.
Yeah,
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah.
it's where he got his ideas. Who knows? I mean, oh yeah, there's this Bitsy and is this? No, I don't know. This, I mean, you go down rabbit holes with these stories. I mean, he's entertaining you at the end of the day. It's, sometimes you scratch your head. What is this strip about this month? But anyway, the one thing when I talk about the shrinking of the size of the strips, he also, as he got into the 70s, and he began thinking about competing with gag strips. He cut back the length of the story. I think they used to be like, 12 or 13 weeks, and he cut them back to maybe 6 or 8 weeks.
Right.
And so there's not a lot of, as you get further in the strip, the stories aren't as complex. They don't have as many characters. And each daily strip kind of ends in a half joke. Oh, here we are. He's going to the Pentagon or something to check in.
He's not bald anymore, so his memory's back, everybody.
Yeah, well, yeah, his memory comes back after after his hair comes back.
We all knew that it was going to happen.
Oh my gosh. Oh yeah, he's back in Alaska. This is I can't remember her name, but she's in the 1940 strip, Sunday strip I have. But yeah, he went up in 1954. He went up to Alaska for some sort of missile thing, or submarine thing. I can't remember what it was, but there was a submarine involved. I know that. I don't want to say these strips all run together. How you? But there are a lot. I mean, and it's, for me, as somebody who used to read comic books, I've really come to appreciate these long narratives, the serial nature of them.
Yes.
That this is all one big story, and that just like these are different chapters. Who's this for? Oh, the moon landing.
The moon landing.
Did a special strip for the moon landing. Good for him. Wow. Yeah, he's up in Alaska doing all this stuff, and people are walking on the moon. Crazy. That's one of the things and maybe he just sort of decided that's not something he wanted to do, to get involved in space stuff. But I don't think there ever really was outside of missile stuff, there really wasn't any NASA things that I remember. Oh, and there are all those lovely volumes.
There you go.
I love the covers. I mean, they're it's the same sort of with the magazine from the 1980s. That you can grab such dynamic artwork. Hey, that's my Slack coming up all of a sudden now that my hour is up on it.
I love it. It's like they got the vintage postcard or stamp kind of look to it.
Yeah, and it gives you
you can hear that big band playing in the background as you're looking at this kind of stuff. Definitely evokes the style, the era.
Yeah. Somebody should go through and count how many cigarettes there are in this strip.
So many.
How many punches? How many concussions poor Steve has had? So you're not going to give me any clues to what this big Caniff announcement is, or is that's still a tease for another day?
That's a tease for another day. You know what? I will. Maybe we could talk about that after we're off the air, but we can't give any of that away right now.
I'll sign the documents. Yeah, I'll sign the documents you send me.
Let's see here. We have some comments. Some of them come from toward the beginning of our conversation. Benjamin L. Clark says, "What a dream come true for such a dedicated fan." I'm talking about you getting all the strips there, but also about I don't know, about his wife collecting all of the strips as well.
Yeah.
Bob.
Go on.
Sorry, Bob says those collage Sunday pages were always a treat for me when they appeared. I agree. They stand out because they're so different.
Recently, because I also have started picking up some of the Prince Valiant books. I've read a bunch of those, and I read an article where when he was handing off the strip to John Cullen Murphy, he talked about every few months there would be this giant panel in Prince Valiant, and Hal Foster said, every once in a while, it's like a circus. Every once in a while, you just have to trot the elephants out to wake everybody up. And
man, those panels are just amazing, though. Like when he gets married,
right.
Yeah.
But that's the other treat about looking at these strips, is just seeing the craftsmanship. You just don't. It's something you're not. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and I barely remember the strips. But it's not something you expect to see in the newspaper anymore.
Yeah.
And the level of craftsmanship.
Now, at my age, growing up in the through the 80s and early 90s, like when Bill Watterson changed Calvin and Hobbes to be his own special layout, or when Opus or Outland changed to be its own layout, like those were standouts. Like I couldn't believe that it's like they're breaking the conventions.
Right. No, you need to get a certain amount of credibility and stick so that you can say to the publishers, we're going to do this. I mean, Gary Trudeau did the same thing with Doonesbury. I'm not going to fit my strip into that. You're going to have to find a place in the paper to put it.
Right.
This is how big it's coming in. And
which was a way, like I was reading the original, like the first volume of Gasoline Alley, Walt before Skeezix, and like all of the strips were different sizes. Some were a big panel, some were strips, some were like arranged differently. There's no consistency there.
No, there wasn't, and it was more of an allowance for whatever the creativity of the artist wanted to do.
Yeah, that's really nice.
The thing is, when Caniff came out of the AP, cartooning shop, and when he did his started Terry. I mean, the people he was competing with. This was the time when there were people had multiple papers with multiple comic sections that they could choose from in their city.
Yeah.
And so you're competing with every type of strip. And so he's competing against. I don't know or do you guys put out those large black and white artist editions?
No. IDW does, but
IDW does. Yeah, I got the one for Prince Valiant, the Prince Valiant pages.
Yeah.
And there's a page on there where Hal Foster is dedicating it to Milton Caniff, complimenting him about, you're the master. I learned so much, and it's just like it astounds your mind, because they're both incredible craftsmen.
No kidding.
Here's
a comment. Here's a comment for you
from my cousin.
This gives me a greater appreciation of Michael's love for the Steve Canyon strip.
It's just a great respect. I have a great respect for Steve Canyon. It's not love. It's nothing untoward. It's it's more appreciation for the artwork and the storytelling, for sure. But as a comic collector, and just suddenly stumbling upon this incredible find, and being the right person to sort of take advantage of it, in the sense that I get to read it all, but then I get an opportunity to share it with other people. It's a way to sort of continue their story. The love that Bauman and his wife had for each other, that they sort of renewed as they kept the strip going, and his love for the strip that he was so involved in.
I am absolutely glad that you were the person that fell into this and have been the custodian of it for all of these years. Like that.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Oh no, I know that I got lucky, and that I'm very privileged, and I just again, I reached out to you because this is another opportunity before I take it off somewhere it goes to somebody who can actually take a look at it and research with it. And the thing I should say about the Lilly Library is it is open. You can go in and you can request materials. They have Michael Uslan's comic book collection and papers. Which is a huge collection, as well as other types of materials. So it's my alma mater. So I'm happy to give it to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a real treat, Michael. I thank you so much for joining me here, and I hope that even if you don't have your collection anymore, we can have you back again to talk about more
Sure.
Steve Canyon. We should go through a different volume and pick out some of the highlights.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. And we could also talk about, on my way back from Indiana, I'm going to stop at the Billy Ireland Museum again. I'm doing some research on some other Caniff-related things. Some of them
Cool.
are, and be happy to talk about any of that. But yeah, happy to do it. Happy to come here and get another chance to talk about this incredible experience I had. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Do you have anything you wanted to plug today?
Well, I'm a podcaster as well. For almost 10 years, I've been hosting the weekly It's All Journalism podcast. So if there are any journalists out there who want to hear what other journalists think about what's going on in our media and how we can continue to improve what we're doing, it's alljournalism.com. That's where you find it. I'm there on social media as well. That's probably it. I'm a patch editor, so if you have a patch in your town, read them and subscribe to them. They're great local news sites.
Mm-hmm. And we'll get you those links for the Comic Journal articles that Michael has done, and I'll put those in the description that you can see below. I'll do that after this show, after we finish our live stream here. But thanks, everybody.
Excellent.
Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for your comments. And yeah, we'll see you next time. See you later.